Hello, and welcome to Beyond Shared Legacies, the continuing fight for equity and justice. My name is Catherine Spitz-Cohan, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Pittsburgh, a nonprofit arts organization that presents independent film that helps us to realize that we're far more alike than we are different. Barack Obama said at the 50th anniversary of the March at Selma, the most important word in our democracy is we the people. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Last night at the Oscars, Tyler Perry suggested that we meet in the middle to refuse hate. What can we do individually and collectively to achieve liberty and justice for all? That is the question that we will discuss tonight, and we will make sure to leave time for your questions before we end. I am honored to welcome our distinguished guests, all of whom are fighting for equity and justice through their own platforms. Dr. Shari Rogers is the writer, director of Shared Legacies, and the founder of the nonprofit Spill the Honey. Zach Banner is an offensive tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the president of the B3 Foundation. Rabbi Saperstein is the director emeritus of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. He served on the board of directors of the NAACP for 3 decades and was the first Jewish person to be appointed ambassador for international religious freedom. Reverend Tim Smith is the CEO of Center of Life, a community empowerment organization, and pastor of the Keystone Church of Hazelwood. Welcome to all of you. Shari, I'd like to begin with you, as your film, Shared Legacies, is playing at our currently running JFilm Festival, and that is the catalyst for why we're here tonight. Tell us, how did the film come to be?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm so honored to be a part of this film festival and to be here with these distinguished guests. It's just incredible. The film was inspired in many ways. First, by my own Jewish values and this tikkun olam, which is to make the world a better place. And I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I happen to be at the Charles Wright Museum, which is an amazing African-American museum in Detroit. And Dr. Martin Luther King's Dr. Martin Luther King's legal attorney happened to be a professor at Stanford, and he was speaking about the civil rights movement. In particular, he had written a book, What Would Martin Say? And I was in the audience, and he wrote a chapter on anti-Semitism. And specifically, he spoke about how the Jewish contribution was integral to Dr. Martin Luther King, and how Dr. Martin Luther King specifically asked him, he said, Clarence, I know you someday will remind people of the 24/7 commitment of the Jewish people to our struggle. So many years later, well, we had met in 2014, and actually in 2015, President Obama was president, and he had invited Clarence Jones to the Oval Office. And it was the 50th anniversary from the Selma to Montgomery March. So he said to Clarence Jones, he said, Congress is coming to Selma. Are you going to be coming to Selma? And he said, of course. So he was honored. And we had already developed a friendship since we originally met at the museum. And we both decided that it would be an amazing opportunity to film the lions, if you will, and the lionesses of the civil rights movement, the people who actually changed history, would all be coming to this extraordinary place, Selma, where folks of all goodwill came together that eventuated in the Voting Rights Act that President Johnson signed. To film there, that was the key.
Okay. So did you know then that this film would be even more relevant, if that's even possible today? Like, what were you thinking as you were making the film? So it took how many years? 5, 6?
Yeah, well, since 2000, we started in 2014, 2015. But at the time, Clarence was saying how even at Stanford, there was a rise in anti-Semitism. So he had noticed as he was traveling college campuses that there was a rise in anti-Semitism, but there was no way we could have predicted, this global movement, if you will, of people of goodwill all over the world focusing on racism and anti-Semitism now, and how this film would be very relevant to provide, important conversations. We actually opened in Atlanta right before COVID, with Martin Luther King's son and the National NAACP director, and it was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, I remember. Rabbi Saperstein, may I call you David? Oh, you're muted. We'll unmute you.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, great. I was really just so moved by the idea that your parents walked at Selma and then stayed there and helped to register voters. So my aside is, or my quick little question is, did you have any choice in, that this would be your life's work as well? Was there any choice at all?
We were raised in this. I was raised in a town on Long Island outside of New York, and it was the town in which the NAACP state division, New York State, used to test de facto segregation of the schools. There was one junior high and one high school, totally integrated, few problems at all in terms of that. But the elementary schools who had been segregated, my mother was one of the leaders of the effort to desegregate that school. And then later, my parents were down for a summer in Selma with a team of clergy and others working with SNCC and then Stokely Carmichael, as he was called then, registering voters in Lowndes County, one of the most dangerous areas and repressive areas of Alabama. And they were there. And my brother had taught at an historic Black college down south and had been at Selma in March as well. So yes, this was just part of my entire upbringing. And it was an honor for me to have been blessed with the opportunity to continue this work once I headed the Religious Action Center.
Thank you. Zach, my family has been season ticket holders since the 1950s. And I have to say to you, I have never been prouder to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And that's because of you and the work that you're doing. So thank you. It really honestly gives me so much more, it's more meaningful to me. I want to ask you about your foundation, if you could tell us what it is, what it does, and how you came to start it at such a young age.
Yeah, it's called the B3 Foundation. It's my personal nonprofit organization. You can find it at b3foundation.org. And, I think it's just really a reflection of like me and just kind of what you get from me and out of me. And that's a big heart. I care about people. I strongly feel that, hate kind of sucks, not just kind of, but it does. And there's just so many different types of way you could fight oppression. And there's just, speaking out last year against anti-Semitism and kind of taking on this allyship, even though I just consider it just being me and who I am. I think it's one of those things where I have so much care for people that if I was to offend somebody, even if I didn't know them, I would make an effort to apologize. And I just, sometimes when you hear things, especially like when you educate yourself and you sit by and you sit back and you educate yourself about other groups and you take the personal time to do research and understand and listen, it creates a natural empathy. And that empathy is spoken in my work that I do with the community in terms of, growing up in an inner city community back home in Tacoma, Washington, giving out backpacks, food during a pandemic, COVID mask, things like that, keeping the kids safe through through my own funding or through my own pockets. It's one of those situations where I strongly just want to fight this this constant pressure on my people. So when somebody else puts down somebody else from a different culture or a different background, religion, it's up to us, especially in the National Football League, especially when it's one of our colleagues. And that's just kind of how it naturally came about in the first place. We have such a large audience, millions of people, millions of different cultures, and athletes are strongly and deservingly, but sometimes we don't deserve them, especially at moments like that, a platform. And when I feel like someone is being hurt or someone was being put down, we try to cancel that out and make sure that it's not the identity of not only us personally, myself personally, my organization, but as a National Football League as well. And so, the B3 Foundation, we focus on education. And like I said, to create that empathy, you have to sit back and listen and research and educate yourself. And I think my foundation is one of those type of things that use its opportunity and platform to educate others about not only myself, but other groups like Jewish people.
Thank you. In the film, Reverend Dr. Shriver says, I think it's at the end, being able to admit the flaws in your upbringing is difficult for most of us. To get over your pride that depends on degrading someone else. And that's one of the questions that I wanted to talk about, which is, how is it you, Zach Banner, have this huge heart, don't want anybody to be offended, and some people find that to be their way of being? It's astounding to me, and I don't know, I don't know what that's about, but I'm grateful.
And it's just that simple. It's a simple but hard and uphill battle against hate. And unfortunately, those same people that use slogans that hurt, like the word kike, call me the N-word. Those are the same people. It's the same groups and it's the same organizations and it's the same groups of hate that have tried to build these walls up around not only themselves but around America and around the rest of the world. And it's up to people like myself and all of us to team up against that.
Well, thank you. Reverend Smith, is it okay if I call you Tim? And you're muted.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I have been in awe of you for a long time. You've been the CEO of Center of Life for 2 decades or going on 2 decades. And I just wanted you to tell us, because maybe we have an international audience, I don't know, but I assume we have a lot of people watching who are from Pittsburgh. And if they don't know you and Center of Life, they should. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do and what Center of Life is?
Sure, Catherine. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, glad to be on the panel with these very distinguished folks. And Center of Life is a Hazelwood-based organization. We're a community empowerment organization that our scope of service has been for the last 20 years now on music and arts, education. We do athletics, we do family strengthening, we do community partnerships as well. Since the pandemic, we've taken on other things because the need came up and it needed to be addressed. So we deliver food every day, toiletries, paper products, cleaning products. We work in partnership with other organizations within the community to create positions where we can, like community health workers. Duquesne University is working with us on that, where they go into people's homes and they check on folks, make sure to check in their vital signs and making sure that they are, that their blood pressure is not too high or their sugar is not, everything is regulated. Make sure there's enough food in the house. For disabled people, we check to see if they need any home modifications in their home, just to make sure that they're okay as well. Sometimes people need rides to hospitals or doctors' offices. So we've taken on some things that we didn't normally do before the pandemic. But those are some of the things that we do. We serve families, children, youth from Hazelwood, as well as other communities around the city. We've had students come in our programs from as far out as Peters Township and Hampton and North Allegheny, all those areas, to get involved in our music programs and our music and arts programs as well. And,
Tim, that's really amazing and impressive. And I wanted to ask you, and I sort of want to throw this out to everyone. Do you think of yourself as an activist?
I do.
And are you trying to encourage with your constituents at Center of Life for citizen activism?
I'm sorry, did you say citizen?
Mm-hmm. Are you encouraging that in whatever the things that you do, whether it's stated or not stated? Do you feel like you're encouraging citizen activism?
Yeah, we do, because one of the core foundations of our organization really is about social justice. We are, we're very intentional about making sure that people understand what their rights are. I spent many years serving as a commissioner on the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. And so, I understand a lot of what is happening when it's happening and what people are not getting when they're not getting it. And especially, I think about young people, because we work with a lot of young people that are in school, that may not be getting, say, a really good education, but yet education is a right. And it's one of those things that we try to make sure that parents understand, that they are involved in their children's lives, because activism is really a broad term, and it can cover a lot of different things. It does cover food and shelter and clothing and education, and it covers so many, voting. It covers so many things. And I've always tried to encourage people that they're probably already doing, they're already an activist in some way, shape, or form, because most people that are involved in activism in some kind of way, especially where it comes to rights, are people who we would call experts. They're people who have been victims of the systemic issues that have continued to persist in our countries for hundreds of years. And those people, which I include myself in, we have been victims of these systems. And so we have become the experts of navigating these systems and figuring out, which way to go, when we know that we're going to come into all these different, hurdles and pitfalls and different things like that. So we have to navigate. And oftentimes I tell people all the time, a lot of people talk about how African Americans need to, assimilate. But I tell people all the time, African Americans do not assimilate. We navigate. We've navigated from the very beginning, and we continue to navigate. And the way we do that is by understanding and learning and taking on more and more knowledge and education, by listening to the stories of our elders and all the people that have come before us, and holding those things dear, and walking with that, understanding that we're standing on the shoulders of some really great people who've really borne the burden in the heat of the day.
That is amazing, and I want to just thank you for saying that. I think we all need to be activists, and I think sometimes some people think of activists in a bad connotation, and so I think that in order for us to make the changes that we want to see and make this a just place, a just world for everyone, that we have to become activists. So it's really what you're talking about is just educating, encouraging, the things that others were talking about previously. I want to go back to you, David, and ask about the voter suppression acts that are happening today. So, if you do the math and you think about your parents, signing up voters to, fight against voter suppression all those years ago, and we're still, is it unrealistic to believe? Is it an unrealistic goal to believe that we will ever be able to assure the right to vote to all people?
Look, this has been a long time struggle in America. We make progress, we get setbacks. We have made significant progress because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. For us in the Reformed Jewish community, we're particularly proud that because the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, the umbrella civil rights organization in the country, was located in our Religious Action Center building in Washington. The civil rights community's contributions in 1964 to the Civil Rights Act and 65 to the Voting Rights Act, in the efforts of the community around several of the reauthorizations of the Voting Rights Act. It happened in the conference room at the Religious Action Center, Black and Jewish lawyers and advocates, lobbyists working together to help keep voting rights legislation strong. It made a big difference in America. But then we saw recently changes in the other direction. The last reauthorization, I believe in 2006, passed virtually unanimously with bipartisan support, was signed into law by a Republican president. How different today here. First, the Supreme Court had gutted one of the key provisions of the Voting Rights Act. Within days, scores of bills to restrict voting rights in states that had long track records of repression of the Black vote were implemented to make it harder to vote. After this election, from the end of this election until now, there have been 250 pieces of legislation introduced into state legislatures that would restrict the right to vote, making it harder to get to polls, cutting down the number of hours, cutting down mail-in votes, cutting down different sites where you can go and drop your mail, early voting being cut down, all kinds of efforts to restrict the vote. And the bipartisan cooperation is so lacking today in America, and continuing one of the great legacies of the Black Jewish Coalition that played such an important role with many other segments of the American populace in getting the original Voting Rights Act through. It will be a big fight to actually restore this, to defeat these legislations, undo some of those like Georgia that have already passed, and Florida is facing a similar kind of bill now. It will be a real fight for us to do. But continuing today, as it has been ever since that original legislation was passed, again, the Black community, the Jewish community are two of the core elements of the coalition that's fighting to win these battles. And we don't have to be the prisoners of a bitter and unremitting past. We can be, we must be the shapers of a better and more hopeful future. And that's something that we're all committed to do. And this film kind of captures the foundation of that. And hopefully we will continue to work together so strongly to make that dream real for all Americans.
I want to add, thank you for that. I want to add that in the film, Lyndon Johnson says, we must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And my question was, is our polarized government capable of doing that? I just don't know. It sure doesn't feel like it is, but it encourages us to continue to fight the good fight that we're all doing.
Can I just add one word? If we're going to succeed, it depends on what happens at the grassroots. So when you listen to the extraordinary work that Tim is doing, that Zach are doing, that's the kind of grassroots that is bringing people together to transform our societies. That has to happen all across America and is happening all across America. So what you two are doing, it makes such a difference. And taking films like this film and helping people understand the power of working together, that too is a source of immense optimism that we should have.
And I just want to add that to that, just like in Selma in 2015, President Obama was standing there and there was tears in everybody's eyes, but who was standing next to him? Not only Congressman John Lewis, but President Bush. So there was this feeling of camaraderie, knowing that there's got to be justice that was bipartisan. And before Congressman John Lewis passed away, with the American Jewish Committee and Congressman John Lewis and our own Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence created a Black Jewish caucus on Black-Jewish relations, knowing that our two communities had a history in working together and feeling the compassion of each other's struggle while different. But the accomplishments that we achieved, we wanted to inspire for the work that still needs to be done.
You know, one of the things that Obama said when he first became president was, he said, I'm the president now. Now you have to make me keep my promise. And I think that was a very profound, impacting statement for me in particular. But I shared that with many of the young people that I worked with, because I wanted them to understand that the issues that we are dealing with here are, at the very root, we're dealing with a greed for power and control. And so as a result, we can't make a law where everybody can get an equal vote, where everybody can get a vote. It's just ridiculous, But it's really it's kind of more about those who want to stay in power and keep control over people. And then there are many other elements that are in the mix here with respect to the different cultures. But I think it's going to really be so important that we work, that we actually press into each other even more, and that we link up even more and force these politicians to do what we have hired them to do, what we have elected them to do. We pay them. They work for us, and they need to be reminded about that. And so, favors aside, and a lot of times compromise aside, if it has to be. Because right now we're really at it's almost like a stalemate where it's one side and the other side and they're just not coming together. And but we have to make them come together. We have to make them do the right thing. And that's why I am encouraged by every protest that I'm seeing out there. All these protests, all the different marches, all the different groups that are standing up for what is right, what is just. We have to support that. We have to support all of those movements so that we can see the change, because we won't see the change if we just simply play by the rules.
Since last summer, it feels like to me that there are more and more white people that are joining the fight against racism. And I wanted to know, Tim, what action steps can white people take to help the movement?
Yeah, I think that it starts off as a very personal journey for a lot of people. I think it's so important to reflect on where we've come from. I reflect when I'm engaged in talking to people about righteousness, justice, and equity, about inclusion and all those kinds of things. And, I try sometimes to stay away from the politically correct words. And I try to go deep to where I came from, to what the things that caused me to be kind of who I am and caused me to operate the way I operate. And I encourage my white brothers and sisters to do the same thing. Go back and take a look, go deep, reflect on what you were taught, reflect on what, the things that you were told about Black people, the things that you were told about Jewish people. You need to reflect on that and then begin the education process. We just actually, my wife, Donna Smith, she just started an organization called the Social Justice Resource Center. And through that Social Justice Resource Center, what she's doing is she's bringing together people from different backgrounds. Some of them are suburban, some of them are urban, some of them are rural, and they're coming together and they're having some really, really courageous conversations. But one of the nice things about this is they're able to come together and people are giving each other grace. It's really important that we give each other grace. Like none of us are perfect. We're all like, we're all dusty angels, trying to help each other. And so what has to happen is we have to be able to come together and understand that none of us have it all together, but we need to give each other enough grace so that we can build relationship, understand each other, and get to know each other. And I tell you, the value of that, you all, is one of the things that we did. We had a meeting with some high school students and a group of police officers. And we invited the police officers to come to our place to talk with the high school students. And the officers came over, about 8 of the officers came over. They didn't have on their uniforms. They just came just as civilians, and they had conversations and they talked about different things. And, and I'll cut across the field a little bit. Later on, after that meeting, there was an incident downtown Pittsburgh where one of our students was in the mix, but really wasn't involved. And one of the officers that was in the meeting with us was also in the mix. And somebody was trying to blame one of our girls for starting this issue. And when the officer saw the young lady, he recognized her and she recognized him, and he vouched for her. And he was like, no, she wasn't involved in that. I already know she wasn't involved. And it was really, it was kind of special, that she came back and told us about that. That was so powerful. But it was just a matter of somebody knowing somebody else, somebody getting to know somebody else. They have vastly different backgrounds, but because they spent that little bit of time at our place, there was a connection there. And for some reason, that officer felt like, you know what, I'm going to stand up for this young lady, because she's being blamed for something that she really wasn't involved in. And I think that when we talk about, it's not just about what can white people do to not be more racist or anything like that. It's about what can people do, what can human beings do, so that we can all tap into the greatest part of what we are, which is our humanity, to recognize to recognize everybody's humanity, that we're all human. Like the hardest part of this struggle with respect to racism is when people don't understand that we are human, that we're all human. Like there is a destiny that makes all of us related, and so how is it that we can, how anybody can look at anybody else as, less than or more than, when we're actually all equal to? It's really interesting, So I think that those are the kind of things that people need to do. People need to pause and reflect. We need to learn from each other. We need to build relationships, and then we'll have a real reason to stand with each other. Because I think because that is one of the reasons why the Black community and the Jewish community have been able to work together, because we have some things in common that we realize that have touched us, and it goes well beyond some of the tangible things. It goes to a deeper spiritual journey that we've been on for a long time.
Thank you for that. You can't teach somebody not to hate. In other words, you can't tell them like, oh, well, you shouldn't hate. It doesn't work. They have to learn through the experience of knowing someone, or their own desire to educate and grow and learn and listen. I wanted to talk to you, Zach, if you can unmute yourself, about the educational work that you're doing through the foundation. And what you brought it up earlier. You said something about education and how it's connected.
Yeah, definitely. On the past, pre-COVID and stuff, my engagements with kids and stuff like that, like speaking to kids, a lot of conversations that I have, especially with the kids back in my neighborhood and back where I grew up, is the understanding of the importance of education. I didn't make it all the way here without taking each level of education seriously, starting with elementary school. And it's crazy, if you drive whether it's 15 minutes outside of the city of Pittsburgh or it's 15 minutes outside the city of Tacoma, it's incredible the difference between the mindset of the children that far, and that close, I should say. They, graduating high school and going to college is very realistic to a lot of kids, maybe up north in Wexford, but in East Pittsburgh and stuff like that, there's certain areas of town, not just East Pittsburgh, but throughout the city, where kids deal with the issue of seeing their lives past 16 or 17, 18, just at these incredibly young ages where that source of inspiration doesn't come from their household. If they do have a home, it's that serious, there were just some kids that I know growing up who were ready to make families in high school, and think that they understood what they had as a career path, when realistically they didn't. And they just said that to stay cool at the table. But when you're dispersed and shot out of a cannon out of high school, you're no longer considered a kid to most society. You become an adult very, very fast. Everybody in this panel obviously has their lives together and has had outstanding, awesome, achievements and milestones. But some of these kids that I speak to and that I reach out to and that our foundation works with don't see themselves ever accomplishing anything outside of, unfortunately, especially in inner cities and stuff, we deal with, a lot of early teen pregnancy, a lot of, we're just talking about the really minute details of life that kids just can't seem to grasp. Like I said, that's who we work with. But we also work with amazing, and not to say those other kids aren't amazing, but amazing students. We're actually in the process of narrowing down our finalists for our annual Ron and Vanessa Banner. Both of my parents are educators. The Ron and Vanessa Banner Scholarship Fund, which is a $40,000 commitment, 4 years, $10,000 each year towards college. Especially you guys could imagine post-pandemic and still in the pandemic, and just the kids who want and show not only appreciation in their community and their schoolwork, but also have aspirations of making the community better. That's part of our memo at B3 is better together. And once again, we're talking about, Jews and teaming up with blacks teaming up with Jews. We're also talking about great students helping out other students who might have difficulties in school and difficulty in goal setting and just managing their lives. And just, our team does a lot of great work.
Sounds like it's just really, truly amazing. I want to move to a question from the audience. Lori Sisson is asking Tim. Tim, you said, actually, it's a question for everyone, but Tim said, we cannot be constrained by the rules as we work to push our representatives toward equality. What rules need to be broken and how do we justify breaking them? Anyone?
Well, since my name was mentioned, I'll start off and then I'll hand it over. But I think one of the things that we need to address in a way, and not just address but get rid of, is the Electoral College. It's just ridiculous. It has no place in our society anymore, and we understand why the Electoral College exists, and it has to do with numbers. It has to do with how many people can vote and how many people will vote, and how that impacts, an election. And as the African American vote is growing, and as the Latino vote is growing, people who have been in power and control continue to get more and more fearful that they're going to lose that power because of something that is antiquated and as outdated as the Electoral College. And so, we not only need to deal with that, but we need to deal with the Constitution. But I don't want to go there yet, because dealing with the Constitution is that's a painstaking, long process that needs to happen. We have a lot of outdated language that is in our Constitution that needs to catch up with where we are as human beings living in our world today. We need to make those changes as well. But that to me is one of the bigger things. I think we also need to begin, and I think there's the movements that are out there right now to reform some of the systems. Let me just talk about 4 systems that I believe need to be reformed. And one is, and this is being done by the Social Justice Resource Center. The first is substandard education. The second is bad policing. The third is the court system, and the fourth is the prison system. Capitalism runs through all 4 of those systems. That is the school to prison pipeline that works like siblings, and the only way that we're going to see a change in the way people go through these systems and they end up in prison for the disproportionate amount of time. Some people shouldn't be in prison at all. The only way we're going to do that is to challenge these systems and to begin to break them down and to begin to build up something that is more relevant with who we are today as people.
Yeah, I have to say that in the movie, you see Black young men and women holding up a sign, "I am a man." The fact that human beings in America had to hold up a sign, "I am a man," and we're continuing having to hold up that sign that says Black Lives Matter, shows us that we still have this long way to go. And, reflecting back in the film is that, we forget many of the front runners or the folks who were on the front line had just experienced the Holocaust. And so like Rabbi Heschel, for instance, his 3 sisters were murdered in Nazi Germany, and they had to hold up different signs, whether it was a star on themselves. So they understood when they came to America and, and saw human beings having to hold up a sign, "I am a man," what does that say? So, it's different now, but still, we are still holding up that sign, Black Lives Matter, and we need to really unpack that so that we all share in this common humanity of justice.
I just was going to say, we talked about the need for us to work together. And, I just want to talk a little bit about the idea that our government is doing one thing, but you guys are doing grassroots things. And it takes both to get somewhere. And it sounds like the grassroots can really make a difference. And we've seen that with other movements. I'm thinking specifically of the right to marriage for gay people. That was very much driven by grassroots efforts. But when you talk about signs, it makes me think about the sign that was a billboard in Pittsburgh that said, "There are Black people in our future." And the fact that caused such an uproar. I mean, to me, it is just an extension of what you're talking about, Shari. And so, Tim, could you talk a little bit about that? Did you have anything to do with that? Or Zach, I don't think you were here yet. But Tim, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I am familiar with that. And really, a big part of that had to do with the art community. There's been a real push from artists all over Pittsburgh that have been communicating messages through their art, through their exquisite art, about justice and equity and fairness. And so I remember when I first saw the statement, it hit me, because it was like, wow, I should know this. But, it hit me as if, man, I was thinking, wow, are we going to be extinct because of the struggle? because of the struggle that we continue, because I continue to see many of my brothers being gunned down on, on television, on camera, those kinds of things. And so, seeing something like that, it's like a reminder that, what, we're gonna make it through this. We're gonna make it through this. And not only that, I saw something else that I thought was very impacting, and it was talking about how so many of the African-American boys and girls that have been killed are like seeds that have been planted. And the manifestation of those seeds, you all, is not just Black people, but the manifestation of those seeds that have gone into the ground and died. Now they are growing, and they are Black and white and Latino and Asian and Egypt and on and on, on and on. There's so many groups that have sprung up from just one Black person, one Black seed falling to the ground and dying. To me, that is encouraging, and that says a lot about what our future can look like. If we learn how to come together, and if we learn that we're all one and we're equal.
Zach, I have a question for you. When I think about, politicians, and I think about us as grassroots activists, talk about, to the degree that you can, the organization that you work for, the NFL in general. Are they supportive? We know what happened with Colin Kaepernick, so they've come a long way, they being the NFL. But I mean, do you feel like you have support? And what do you think the role of a professional athlete? I mean, do you think all professional athletes should be taking a stand like you are?
Yes, just because it's to, and I know you're asking the question to bring up the topic, but when people first attempt to try to strip that away, that means you're giving me a label. And if you really put that down to the root of that, it means I work for you, and I don't. I'm not here for your entertainment, even though I understand that that's part of it. One person, I forget who said it, but one person said, without the cameras and without an audience, football and sports in general would just be a bunch of men and women playing against each other for recreational fun. But the business behind professional football and professional sports also has an audience. But with that audience, when we all disperse, we all go back to our normal lives from that sporting event. But I should say that's from an audience standpoint, because that is part of our lives as athletes. But when we leave the stadium, we all leave the stadium, we all go back to being U.S. citizens, or we all go back to being normal citizens of society. And with that being said, I'm no longer your entertainment. I'm no longer, during that game time, like when that game turns over, your entertainment is done. I have to go back to being human. So that's just kind of the basic thought of that question. But then when you bring in like the awesome, amazing, brave men and women throughout the National Football League who have been really busting their tails for years and years to be able to get a voice, it's a reflection off of how big of a platform the NFL and the National Football League and professional sports actually are. So we talked about how it's also a break from society for some people. It pisses them off when we interrupt their games. I don't understand why. I would love for people who disagree with, kneeling during national anthem like Colin Kaepernick did before all of us, who set the trend and all these things. I would urge you to show me a different way to get your attention than interrupting your football game. Just saying that ironically. I mean, it's just dumb. I mean, I'd rather kneel in a corner and do that peacefully and safely than other, ways. And so with that being said, I also think that in reality speaking, 80 to 90% of the National Football League is black and brown. So we're living through it. So when you ask if athletes should become activists, you know, I honestly don't take on the activist like title. I know it comes with everything that I do, and I know it comes with it. And I don't want to shoot down what Tim was saying, because he's damn right. Like, it's just, we have to take that on that role. Like I said, that's just naturally built into me. But I'm also a 6'9" black man that's had to defend himself his entire life from not only people who look like him, but others who don't. So I'm not fearful to speak my heart, but there are people that are, especially in my sport, who are not my skin tone. And it's awesome to see amazing white brothers and sisters being allies publicly. And then also I take that to the, you know, to my audience, you know, because I have also, as much as I've stepped up and spoken up and put my neck out there for Jewish people, I've also asked them, especially, you know, I've learned that there's so many different types of Jews, but especially the fair-skinned white ones who can take, you know, I heard a rabbi once say, he said, Zach, when I take my yarmulke off, I take away my Judaism and I hide it for a little bit. Like, I can't do that. Tim can't do that. And it's not so much a moment where I'm asking for your sadness. It's more of, like I said, I've learned how to defend myself. So has Tim. He's educated himself in so many different ways where he tries to sprout that information to so many youth and so many people out here in the city. It's almost just like a reality check that there are bigger and far more important things than this dumbass football game. Excuse my language.
Thank you. Rabbi, you're muted.
I shouldn't be. It doesn't
You're
send
not
it.
now.
Okay. If I can jump in on this and affirm what Tim and Zach have just been saying. You know, someone talked about the phrase about breaking the rules. I think what it means most of all is simply not accepting a status quo that is institutionally unjust. And it's time to say enough. That's what this is all about. That's what the people in the film did in the 1960s in the face of Jim Crow. They're nearly a century of enforced segregation in this country and repression in this country. And they said, enough, we're not going to take it anymore. And we have that feeling today. So what does that require? It requires dealing with our own institutions, the racism in our synagogues, our churches, in the NFL, in universities, in corporations in America, in institutions in general, and say it is time for us to acknowledge that, to acknowledge what white privilege means in America, and to say we're going to change, and we're going to follow the leadership of people of color in this country who are leading the efforts all across America. Those demonstrations were the largest mass demonstrations in the history of the United States that we witnessed after George Floyd's killing. It's an extraordinary moment when that happens. And what it means is not accepting the laws that are bad. And advocacy has to be part of it. Here and working together. We work together as in a single achievement that happened in the 20th century, that blacks and Jews were not part of that core coalition that made it happen, but together with the labor unions and then with the mainline Protestant community, a Catholic Church, a faith community here, and then later on the fragmentation of that coalition into women's groups and environmental groups. And who were those people? They were in every extent a bipartisan coalition of decency on Capitol Hill and multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious coalitions of decency in every community in America. We need that today. We need that more than ever. That's the lesson of Shared Legacies more than any other, that we need those kinds of efforts today. We have to change structures. We have to change policies. We have to change people. Your call for education, Tim, being at the core of all of this, and your program, Zach, and yours, Tim, giving people hope they can make their lives better. All of these institutional things have to change in America. We have a sense that this is a crossroads, that we really can make this happen. In the ebb and flow of things, there's a flow going on now. We have to capture that tide and continue to move as assertively and confidently as possible into that better future.
There's so many things in addition. Rabbi, I couldn't agree with you more. I thought about something in the film where Martin Luther King received the Nobel Peace Prize, and they were not going to celebrate that in Atlanta. And the rabbi who was involved in that, his wife and him, they were able to put pressure on some folks. And it just turned everything around. And next thing you know, there was this celebration and everybody's buying tickets to this event, And I thought about that. I thought about how it's not a either or kind of thing. There's so many things that we can be doing from the very personal level, people who have power and control can use that power to convince some of the people who also have power and control to do the right thing, to get them to a better place, because it happens that way as well. It happens through us marching, through protests, through going to our politicians, to writing letters, all kinds of ways it happens. But there's those personal things that really, have impacted my own life. I think about my father was a pastor. He was the only Black pastor in Pittsburgh that had a church in a white neighborhood. And this was in the late 60s. I was just a little guy. And we were in a neighborhood that had never had any Black pastors in it, but the church was in the heart of the neighborhood. And we experienced such hatred from the folks who were in that community. And they came at us, man. I mean, they broke the stained glass windows. They tried to set the church on fire. They had a professional squatter come in and squat in there. And just to make a long story short, my dad decided, you know what, I'm not leaving here until I get ready. And so he just really settled in and he started these campus ministries. And through the campus ministries, he actually was bringing all kinds of people to the church. Many of these people were actually Jewish people. And I remember my dad coming to us and telling us, this was now in the 70s, my dad coming to us and telling us, you know what, a Jewish guy came up to me and offered me money for the church, and because he is already looking at opening a church in Hazelwood, and he said he just offered me cash for the church, and I thought, throughout our lives we've had Jewish people in our life. My grandfather had Jewish people in his life that impacted his life. He was one of the first Black men to actually own a home in Homewood. So it's like I think about ways that people can help in small. These are small ways. These are small things, but how they could actually snowball if it happened top down and bottom up. If we could get it happening on a larger scale, we can make politicians do what they need to do. We can make big businesses do what big corporations do what they need to do. We can make this happen, but we have to continue to keep the pressure on. We have to press the battle all the way to the gate. And the gate is their bottom line, their profit.
Zach, I was thinking, think of the movie. You got Jackie Robinson and Kibby Kaplan, debating like, you should be president. No, you should be president. Or at the March on Washington, Clarence Jones is meeting with the celebrity delegation like Martin Luther King and Marlon Brando and Burt Lancaster and all the folks there, because they knew back then that, and Dr. King understood that the celebrity had power, and their power was to be used to promote justice. So this has been going on from back then, and it's important on all different levels. And even in Birmingham, I think of the little kids who would run out of the school. A lot of the people would say, because their parents were working and they would have gotten fired out of their jobs. So the kids, little 12-year-olds, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds would be out in the street pressing for Blacks to vote. And I think about it during COVID, we're all we can't breathe sitting at home. But this whole idea of trying to make the world a better place, it just humanizes us all. And seeing that terrible murder of George Floyd just connects us all in a way that, we just need to make the world a better place. And, I'm hopeful now, in spite of everything going on, that we just need to galvanize this moment in this time to just push it.
And as Dr. King said after the Birmingham church bombing, that those 4 girls who perished have something to say to every politician who has fed his constituents with the stale bread of hatred and spoiled meat of racism. They say to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murderer. We're all implicated in that, all of us. And it's time for us to say, we can do better, and we're going to do better.
On that note, I'd like to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so deep with feeling and grateful to all of you for sharing your wisdom and the work that you're doing. And I'm hopeful that this is the first of many conversations that we can continue to have, and that we can seize this moment and continue to do the great work and to get into good trouble. I want to thank our Film Pittsburgh audience for tuning in, and I want to let you all know that the JFilm Festival continues through May 2nd. Shari's film called Shared Legacies is available along with the other films to be viewed. Ticket information is at filmpittsburgh.org. Again, to our panelists tonight, I cannot thank you enough. I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation, and it just inspired you, like it has me, to go on and to continue to do the hard work. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine, and the Pittsburgh Film Festival. Thank you.